Okay, good. And I just want to clarify again, we're not required to post this. This is not a public sort of FOIA meeting, whatever. So I'm recording it so that if people want to review and sort of go back to some of the questions and stuff, so I'll post it. I'll probably just put it into the YouTube, but I won't say, hey, everybody look at this video. I'll just send you guys the link. And if people stumble upon it, fine. I don't think there's anything, sensitive there.
May also be a source for Joe for notes if he needs to go back to the video.
Yep, good.
I did wonder last night and tonight whether any potential applicants are dropping in to listen to.
You know what? I tried to scan. Telephone numbers, obviously, I don't know, but there were no names that I recognized. That'd be pretty slick, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to bow out now. Enjoy. And
happy anniversary, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Cheers.
Cheers.
And as it's 7:01, I'm going to let everybody in. There's 8 folks in the waiting room. All right, Joe, I think everybody's in at this point.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Folks, good evening. I'm Joe Arardi. I'm the consultant. I'm really privileged actually to be working with the steering committee that's representing Easton, Reading, and Region 9. Thank you for attending. Just to make sure we're all in the right space, this is the community forum with information and then input from the attendees for the steering committee, which will represent the hiring committee through the process until the final round. So thank you all for being here. I want to share just a couple of words about who I am, and then I want to get right into it and share the process, the timeline, and the work that has taken place and the work that will take place. As I mentioned when we opened, I'm Joe Arardi. I retired as a school superintendent, a Connecticut school superintendent in August of 2017. So nearing 3 years ago. Prior to retirement, I was a teacher coach, my high school principal for quite a while. In the last 20 years of my career, a school superintendent. I spent a significant amount of time in Southington, and I was really privileged to be selected for the rebuild and the recovery of Newtown, spending the last 4 years of my career there before retirement. I knew retirement wouldn't go well, and it didn't. So I launched a consulting business shortly after August of 17. My work is focused in 2 spaces. One, for school safety. I'm privileged to be the consultant for the national organization as they take me around the US trying to share best practice. And the second lane, and the reason why we're here, is I've been now engaged with, I believe, 21 school boards over the past 3 years. That's a terrific, real busy. And I do my absolute best to make sure that the pool is rich and the selection process ends up in a premium space for that local school board or school boards. So with that being said, I want to share with you where exactly we are in the process, and then I want to share with you how your voice is part of the process moving forward. Under the direction of Chris Hocker and Randy Hicks, who are the co-chair of the 9-member steering committee. Again, 3 members from Easton, 3 members from Reading, and 3 members from Region 9. Under the direction of Chris and Randy, we have met probably for the past 6 weeks. The application process actually comes to close tomorrow, July 10th. I've shared with the steering committee an average yield in Connecticut is somewhere around 15 completed applicants. I shared with the steering committee members that are on this evening that I anticipate that number 15 to be doubled, that you will have most likely 30 plus applicants for your next superintendent's position. I want to pause just for a second, and I would ask our steering committee members who are on this evening, if you could just raise your hand so folks know who you are, and you'll have a chance to say a few things at the close of the hour. Applications coming to close on Friday, July 10th. What then will happen is in public session on Tuesday, July 14th at 7 p.m. I will take all of the information I've been able to ascertain from multiple sources and put it together for the steering committee and for the three boards as the profile that Easton and Reading is hoping for that their next superintendent will have in their portfolio. So really what that means is this. There has been a survey that was posted nearly a month ago. And that survey has over 300 participants that have weighed in. That's a huge number for the size of the two communities that we're looking to fill. In addition to that, I've had the opportunity to meet with every faculty and staff in all 5 of your schools. This is the second of 2 community forums. I've dialed into elected and appointed officials, and I've had probably 2 to 3 dozen phone calls from folks wanting to share information to me. I take all of that information, I homogenize it, and I share it to the steering committee and the 3 boards of this is what the profile looks like. This will take place on Tuesday, July 14th. At the close of the Tuesday, July 14th public meeting, by Connecticut statute, the steering committee is able to go into what's called a non-meeting, which means the public is not allowed, the press is not allowed. And in the non-meeting, we will then discuss the 30 applicants and who will qualify for the first round of interviews. It's an important piece for me to pause there so the community members who are on this evening understand the reason why. We've tried to make this search as open to all stakeholders as possible through July 14th. The reason why that confidentiality piece is so important is that I am absolutely certain that if this search was exposed at any time beyond the finalist, you would have nowhere near the number of applicants. The mindset of the applicant is that they do not want to be exposed publicly and then have to go back to their local school board. So there's a confidentiality piece that the steering committee has done a wonderful job holding on to, and they deeply understand. Selections will be made. Interview evenings will take place on Tuesday, July 21 and July 22. Your voice is part of the interviewing process because of the questions that will be asked. This evening, you'll get a sense of how that will all play out, but the questions that will go forward to first round candidates will be generated from the community conversations, will be generated from the community survey, will be generated from the meetings that were had at all our 5 schools. At the close of round 1, and I anticipate somewhere between 4 and 8 first round interviews. At the close of round 1, those moving forward will reconvene on Wednesday, July 29th. In most cases, that first round interview is about 1 hour. In most cases, the second round interview is undefined. Undefined meaning that that candidate should not leave until the steering committee has asked every question and that there is nothing pending that they still want to know about that person sitting in front of them. That could take an hour and a half, it could take 2 hours, it could take longer, it could take shorter. What will then take place after Wednesday, July 29th, is that the steering committee will be back to their school boards at large. And at some point, if all goes well, I anticipate that a public meeting will take place at some point, potentially within the first 2 weeks in August, to name your new superintendent. The question that I'll anticipate that I'll answer before we open up to discussion is when will that new superintendent actually sit in the chair? I believe that Dr. McMorrin is on board through August 15th. I also know that in nearly every administrative contract, not only in Connecticut, but across the country, in every administrative contract, there's a 90-day clause. In most cases, my experience and the experience of consultants and local boards is that once an employee has indicated they are leaving for a new position, you do your best to make sure they're successful where they're going. So you marginalize that 90 days to whatever works on both spaces. The unknown is the COVID environment. So in the best case scenario, you could see your new superintendent perhaps sitting in that chair on or around Labor Day. In the longest case scenario, if all goes well, it could be a November seat. You'd also need to know as a community that the steering committee, I thought, made a great decision and chose to advertise not only locally in Connecticut. I think that's the reason why you have a robust pool. I believe your applicant pool right now is represented by 9 or 10 different states. Your applicant pool consists of sitting highly regarded superintendents, assistant superintendents, central office staff, and in some cases, highly regarded building administrators. That's the information that I wanted to share with all that are on this evening. And before I ask you a few questions, is there anyone that has any question around timeline, around process, around anything that I just stated over the last few minutes? Are there any questions? If you do have a question, just raise your hand. I don't see any. Chris, do you? No. Okay. What I'd like to do to start off with is to ask those that are in attendance a broad question, but I think a question that has some great meaning to it. If you, meaning the stakeholder that you represent, whether it's a parent, community member, senior citizen, teacher, or whatever you believe you hold as credentials in your community, if you had the opportunity to share what you believe is most important for the steering committee to know in regards to the hiring process, what would be the best advice you would give to the steering committee? What would you like to share with them? Devin, why don't we start with you? Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. That was quick. So I'm just going to assume that table stakes are they have experience leading high quality schools, that they obviously know instruction, curriculum, pedagogy. Like, to me, those are just obvious things. So there are two things that I would put as like very, very important. And I will say them in order of importance to me. I'm both a parent. I've worked in education for 20 years. I'm the head of academics at a large education company, and I was also an educator. So first is a strong focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Evidence, so not only experience, but strong evidence of employing and implementing initiatives of anti-racism training in their faculty and staff, in creating inclusive communities, especially in similar communities as Easton/Reading, and really great experience creating curriculum or creating spaces where decolonized educational curriculum can exist. So being open to changes from teachers and open to response from students and family members in the community. So that's number one. Number two, given the environment that we are in, understanding remote learning, how to unfortunately make kind of the best out of really challenging situations, knowing that especially in the younger grades, remote learning is not ideal. Like, teaching kindergartners how to read over Zoom or Google Meet is not an ideal situation, but we may have to figure it out. So being a leader in that space and being a thought leader, having connections to other thought leaders in remote learning, and being willing to really go out and try and learn how to do those things, and make sure that their school leaders in both the Reading and Reading and Easton elementary schools have access to that kind of training, I think are really important.
Devin, thank you so much. And Devin, just so you know, and those that are on with you know, that what I do is I'm taking notes as you're talking. This is also being recorded, so if you need to go back, I can do that. But at some point over the weekend, I'll be sending the steering committee and the school boards the community profile. And your comments clearly will not be connected to Devin W., but will be part of the executive summary that goes forward. Okay, just so you know how that all plays forward. Additional
Thank you.
thoughts or comment? Thank you. Additional thoughts or comments of what's your best advice you'd like to give to the steering committee before they start their really heavy lift of finding the absolute perfect fit for both communities? Just raise your hand if you'd like to share. Julianne, go ahead.
Hi, so I'm Julianne. I'm part of a group of alumni that's been working to kind of make diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives at Barlow just more of an active part of our mission as a community, educationally and like socially, just in the community. And a couple of things that I wanted to emphasize, there are a few of our members here last night who I understand gave you some good points. But I wanted to just emphasize kind of about inclusion over just checking a box of diversity and what that means to us. So hearing some of these comments, you might be thinking like, oh, we need to hire a superintendent of color or something like that. But understanding that we're not just looking for like that diversity check mark. We want somebody who before hiring teachers of color can ensure that supports are implemented to promote inclusion, including initiatives to allow white educators to reflect on implicit biases and their own privileges, having ongoing race conversations, demonstrating a commitment to, like Devin said, decolonizing the curriculum. And we want to make sure that the interview process for the superintendent actively seeks candidates that are well suited to address racial injustice in this ER9 school district as it exists, that can make it more comfortable for eventually having more people of color as educators. We want somebody who demonstrates prior commitment to diversity and inclusion. Not just somebody who says that they're going to do that, somebody who has that experience and has previous engagement with like these social justice oriented solutions. So those are a few things, and I can keep bringing up thoughts as you ask questions. Thanks.
Julianne, did you start by stating that you were a student at Barlow or you were a graduate of Barlow?
Sorry, I'm a 2017 graduate of Barlow,
Okay.
rising senior at Georgetown University.
Good for you. Congratulations to you. And thank you for your comments. You may or may not know, and I think you probably do, that there was membership from your group that was on last evening. They were very articulate and very smart. So thank you for carrying that conversation forward.
You're welcome.
Other folks who would like to share information with the steering committee, it's a great opportunity. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I'm Elizabeth. I'm a Barlow alumni, and I'm also involved with the same group that Julianne is. And I think just to emphasize some other points is I really do think that a lot of changes that we've talked about that have to do with diversity and inclusion really need to originate from the superintendent's office. And so I really urge the hiring committee to prioritize finding candidates that are able to and willing to make these changes. So first of all, I urge you to look for candidates who are from outside of the ER9 school district. I was really glad to hear that there have been candidates from outside of the state, because I think that candidates from outside of our district would be better equipped to be objective and critical of our current practices and make meaningful changes that need to happen. I also think that they should have relevant experience in making major curricular and systemic changes in whatever job they had prior to this. I also urge the hiring committee to look for candidates that are experienced with working in and with diverse populations. I personally, in my time in the ER9 school district, found that a lot of administrators had little to no experience working with students of color, LGBTQ+ students, ESL students, and other minority populations. And I think that's a major problem that contributes to a culture of discrimination and microaggressions throughout the school district. I also urge the hiring committee to ask specific questions of all the candidates to make sure that they have experiences with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and are knowledgeable about these topics and have experience in fostering a more inclusive environment. And that means somebody who's ensured that there's a supportive environment available for students, for staff, for parents, and especially for those populations of students, staff, and parents of color. And I think just to echo what Julianne said, it isn't enough for a superintendent candidate to just say that they treat everyone equally. our superintendent should be aware of race and able to create an environment that actively supports people of color and ensures that that diversity is celebrated and supported, and it acknowledges the struggles and difficulties and unique barriers that people of color and other minority groups face. And finally, I also just want to add that I would ask the hiring committee to look for candidates who have clear plans to unify our 3 school districts and ensure that Easton and Reading students are equally prepared to join together at high school and are given equivalent opportunities for academic and extracurricular enrichment. Thank you.
Elizabeth, I sent you my email address. And if you'd like, I'd like to send to you the questions that I'm sending forward in the question bank that were taken from last evening. If you'd like to add to them, you send back to me and I'll make sure they're included, okay?
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Great. And I'll bet you your dad is Craig. Is your dad's name Craig?
Yes.
Why don't we have him speak next? Craig, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Arado. Thank you, board. Parent of 2 alumni. I think it's an important position, and I appreciate the rigor and confidentiality that you're applying. It's a really tough role to fill with a lot of stakeholders to satisfy. And so thank you for taking this input as you work to hire the next superintendent. I think first, it's a learning role where everyone learns. That's staff, faculty, students, parents, board members. I think second, it's one where the ability to prioritize those learnings and communicate them back out and take action from them is important. And third, I'd urge you to prioritize candidates who bring a diversity of ideas, a diversity of experiences beyond Reading and Easton, candidates who bring energy, maybe look beyond the usual candidates who are close at hand. I think you hear there's a passion in the community on many topics, and diversity and inclusion is one example. Consider candidates who've got a track record of proactively reaching out and actioning that energy and use it to help them lead in the role. There was a good discussion here at the board about work groups versus taking action. I think taking action matters. And finally, like Region 9 is an excellent district with many thanks to the hard work and skill of the superintendents, the faculty, the staff who've come before, thousands of alumni, of which I have 2 that are making their way in the world better educated, better individuals, and better citizens because of your work. I thank you for that, and let's find a superintendent who can build on that for the alumni yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you, and very articulate and well stated. Anyone else with Linda, go ahead. Linda Meyer, go ahead.
Am I unmuted now?
You're good.
I'm good. Okay, let me see if I can do the camera, and then I'm having a few logistics here. You can hear, I think you're just gonna have to hear me. I can't put the camera on. But I'm gonna mention a couple other things. I think everything I've heard is absolutely excellent. But there are a couple of things, and I'm not even sure how you look for this, but I have lived here for approximately 10, almost 11 years, and I think we're going on the 5th superintendent. I think one of the things that is not lost on anybody is the unusual structure of this job and the 3 districts that they have to deal with. So how you find someone, call it energy, call it stamina, call it whatever you want, but it takes a special type of person that wants a job that is going to not be a traditional superintendent's job, because he's going to, some parts of the job are going to be superintendent times 3, because he will do it for 3, or she will do it for 3 different districts. And so I think it's important that we find a candidate that has all the qualities we're looking for, but has the energy to do the job, because we've had a lot of turnover. And I think, we have a wonderful set of school systems here, and we need someone who maybe wants to stick with us for a while and get us through. We're going to have a tough few years. We had a tough spring, and I don't see it getting better in the near future. So finding someone who's truly committed and understands the unusual structure we have and all of the implications of that structure, I think is an important part of the search. I also think I would echo the thoughts on someone who's familiar with remote learning. I think that, we all hope things will go back to normal in the near future, but we don't know that will happen. I am in no way, shape, or form complaining about last spring. Everybody made huge efforts to do their best, but I think there are a lot of things that need to need to happen differently going forward. So someone who is familiar with remote learning and the various creative ways where our kids can get more interaction and more feedback. I think that's super important because I'm guessing it might be part of our future again. Whether it is or is not, we certainly need to be prepared for it. So someone who has familiarity, creativity to be able to find ways to make that happen with all of the various challenges for the different age groups and things going on, I think is really important.
Linda, thank you. I want to, if I could, I want to comment just on a couple of things you stated. And you started by talking about your tenure of 10 years in the community and 5 superintendents later. That's something that the steering committee has already looked at and begun to discuss, where it's really important. There are times when the person being interviewed, we can see you now. There are times when the person being interviewed will tell the committee whatever they want to hear. I'm moving into Easton or Reading. My family is moving with me. Our children will go to your schools, and I'll be here till I retire. And then you look at their resume, and every 2 or 3 years they've moved, right? So that's part of the criteria that the steering committee will look at, because longevity is an important piece to growing and moving a district forward. You can't have a new vision every 2 years and think you're going to move in the right direction all the time. Around the structure, part of my job is to make sure that every candidate who's being interviewed understands what they're getting into. And that's an important piece. I did the Region 4 search. And I mentioned last evening in the tiny towns of Deep River, Chester, and Essex, the Region 4 has not 3, but 4 school boards. 32 school board members were around the table when they hired their new superintendent. I'm doing the Region 1 search, and Region 1 sets the precedent for how do you ever manage this. They don't have 3 or 4, they have 7 school boards. There are 6 tiny towns in northwestern Connecticut that all go to Housatonic Valley Regional. So what you're talking about, my conversation with your candidates is really around not will you have a meeting on Wednesday, it's what meeting will you be going to on Wednesday with the present structure. So I don't want anyone to have their hand up raised high, I want this job, if they don't know what they're getting into. You raised some great points. I just wanted to share that at least part of what my responsibility is that there should be absolutely no surprises. And the only time things will go in the wrong direction if there are surprises. So thank you very much for sharing what you shared. Is there anyone else who would like to share information to the steering committee or to the 3 local boards in regards to the hiring or the message that you would like to send forward? Is there anybody else that would like to raise their hand and to share the conversation? Okay, seeing no hands go up. My next question is one that I really hope that folks you weigh in on, because it's important from the candidate perspective. One of the things that I do as a consultant is I want to inform your first round, your semifinals, and your finals with the best information, so there are no surprises. So my question to you is this: if you had the opportunity, perhaps in an elevator, and you're on the 10th floor and you're going down the floor 1 and you've got 30 seconds, what's the best advice you would give to your new superintendent? You're in that elevator alone. What's the best advice you would give to that new superintendent for that person's success formula? What would you be saying to that person? And please don't be shy and raise your hand.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I don't know if you can hear me, and I don't know how to raise my hand.
Stephanie, I can hear you, and you're all set. Good to go. Go right ahead.
Okay. I am a member of the African American community here in Reading, and if I could give one piece of advice, one of them would be to not be on a friendly, personal basis with the family and friends of their students. I find it to be very disadvantageous to those of us who don't have those connections with teachers who are their Facebook friends or otherwise. And so I would ask that person to have some social media standards and at least not put it out there that you are friends with one or several members of the community, because it seems to form a biased opinion. And so That would be one thing I would be most interested in.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for going first too. If you have something else as the conversation continues, just come on in, okay? And thank you for sharing that.
Thank
Other thoughts from those that are on the virtual forum this evening? What's the best advice you're giving to that new superintendent? Devin, go ahead.
Great. I hope you can hear me. Sorry, I'm having some tech issues.
Fine. We're good.
So I think one of the big challenges is the tri-board structure. So just understanding what that means. But I think the other is resource allocation and the challenges around resources and financial budgets. So being able to really look at a budget, understand resources, and think a little bit outside of the box of how to utilize those resources based on needs. So it's not getting trapped in the, well, we've always done it this way mentality, so that we can find resources to fund the things that our community needs, that multiple people have already spoken about, the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, curriculum initiatives, and remote learning.
Thank you. Linda and then Julianne.
I would say that the best advice would be don't let the logistics, get you down and prevent you from doing the educational part of the job. Really, having a vision and taking care of our kids is the important part. And I feel like a number of our superintendents get worn down logically because of all of the logistics. And then when it comes to the rest of the things that need to be done, there's less energy for that. So I would hope that that would be a priority, and they will find a way to make the logistics happen with less energy and the really important parts with more. The logistics being dealing with the budgets and all the things related to the board, which are boards, which are all important, but sort of the vision and the educational part is equally important. And I'm not sure superintendents always get to do that in our area.
Linda, thank you. Julianne, then we'll go to Elizabeth. Julianne?
Hi, so I just like to point out the importance of like student voices in anything a superintendent does. I think it's important to elevate those voices and validate them and include them in your decision-making process. So I'd definitely like to see more of that. I think that young people are often brushed aside as kind of people without experience, but we're often the ones who are closest to the experience with education and the ones who are in the classroom. So when somebody talks about experiencing bias or experiencing something negative in their everyday life at school, we need to believe them and do what we can to help them. And then also responding well to current events. I saw the response from the superintendent's office to the BLM protests, and honestly I wasn't impressed with it. I think that we can do a better job of engaging our students with these current events that are happening, and we want to be on the right side of history when we say, like, what did you do when all this stuff was happening, to engage your school system, to engage your students, and I think that more needs to be done in that regard as well.
Student voice, understood. Julianne, thank you. Elizabeth?
Thanks. So I would say that we live in an area where people have very strong opinions and are often very opposed to change, especially when it comes to our public school system. And I think that's something that's kind of unique, especially since we are such a small town, small towns. So I would advise the new superintendent to not get too caught up in the town politics and just choose the path of no change so as to avoid backlash. I would recommend that they stick to their convictions and make changes that are necessary for students' education, even if they're not universally popular.
Thank you. Anyone else, best advice to your new school leader? What would you be sharing? What's most important for you, for that person to know? Devin, go ahead.
Sorry, one more. And this is coming directly from Julianne and Elizabeth, is just getting into the schools and seeing what the kids are experiencing, knowing and seeing evidence of learning, and really not only talking to students, but experiencing what students are experiencing in the classroom from their perspective firsthand will be really valuable to understanding what needs to change, how things can change, and building relationships with the people experiencing instruction.
Devin, thank you. I see it as admin. I don't know who that is.
Hi, it's Angela Kayas. I'm very sorry. I'm having a fight with my phone and Zoom. I'm admin. Thank you for asking the question. I think everyone has amazing points. My advice to the superintendent, if I was in an elevator, would be to empower and truly support his team and mandate innovation and change. I'd love to see a superintendent that does not stop at hitting standardized test score, but that really comes in and looks at the opportunities we have here in Reading to truly innovate and create a social and an educational system for tomorrow, not just to get past today, not just to get past a budget, but truly to create a vision for the future. And in that vision, to rally his or her entire team around that opportunity, to truly take that step and to constantly be the leader that says, back to our vision, this is where we're going with this. This is where we're going. This is how we're driving forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anyone else who would like to weigh in on that question, information to the new superintendent? Okay, as we round into the third quarter of the hour, I want to open it up to anybody who is part of the virtual platform. Is there anything that you would like to share, to say, for me to know, for the committee to know, for the boards to know, as we move forward in this very important process? Is there something that you're holding on to that you just want to share that hasn't fit nicely so far into any category? If there is, just please raise your hand and share that message. Is there any further information that anybody has that they would like to play forward to me or to the steering committee or to your local school boards? Please raise your hand if there is. Ann Hughes, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm just raising all kinds of things here.
No, you're good. Your hand is up. It's a great emoji. Go right ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks for taking the time to do this.
Sure.
As your state rep and also a member of the community, I'm deeply invested in partnering with the superintendent and the whole school community to try to get the best resources, the best advocacy on the state level for excellent and inclusive and equity education. And that's going to take, as we face tough economic challenges and state budget challenges, that's going to take a real partnership. And I just want to, extend my, accessibility and partnership. Superintendent McMorrin had some great ideas about how to save some costs and get some extra state funding, and he just reached out, and I took it directly to the chairs of the education committee, and we were working on it before this whole COVID shut down the legislative session. But I would love that kind of open door accessibility phone call, send, let's be in good communication about how we can get the best resources going forward, because we're facing an uphill battle.
And thank you. And what I do with whoever your new superintendent is, between being appointed and that person actually starting in the district, I am certain you'll be on a list that gives that person the opportunity in that interim space to set up a time to speak or to meet with you. So thanks so much, and thanks for being on, and thank you for your comment.
You bet. Thanks.
Is there anyone else who would like to share any additional information, steering committee or with the local boards or with me? Please raise your hand. I don't see any hands going up. I want to then end with giving the opportunity to your elected officials, particularly your steering committee members that are on, if they'd like to share any thoughts with you. If you would, any steering committee would like to speak, just if you would raise your hand, or just go right ahead, because I don't think you're on mute. Is there anybody that would like to speak?
I'll just say, I think on behalf of everybody on the steering committee, that we appreciate very much the community response. We've had 2 of these meetings. As you said, Joe, 300 some odd survey responses. you could probably speak to how unusual that is in terms of volume.
Very much so.
So it's very, very much appreciated.
Any
And
other?
I would just add to folks on the call who think of something later or who were hesitant to speak up tonight, Joe's invitation to email or call him is 100% sincere, and I would encourage you to take him up on that offer and speak to him in whatever level of confidence you feel is necessary to have your voice included in the community profile.
Chris, thank you. And folks that are on in the chat category, I put my email address earlier for one of the comments. And I also included, I just sent a few minutes ago, my direct connect for cell. And I assure you that if you call, I not only will listen, I'll pay attention. And if I can't pick up, I'll call you right back. Is to the community at large at this point. Would anybody else like to share any information?
Hi, this is Angela Calles. Just one other piece, and I'm smiling when I say this. But you know, one of the fun parts about picking a superintendent can also be involving the students. And while I appreciate that there is a huge steering committee, and I'm sure you're going to do an amazing job on a difficult task, I just wonder if in the spirit of bringing someone in and encouraging students to embrace that person from the get-go, whether or not you would think about a steering committee at each level, whether or not it would be an opportunity for students to raise their hand and pick or meet or ask questions early to the person. So I'll just throw it out there, but just an opportunity to get high schoolers, to get middle schoolers, and to get elementary students involved and excited early in the pick of a new member to the community.
Angela, I want to comment on that because it's a great thought, and you don't know me at all, and nor do the students at Barlow or at your two middle schools or elementary schools. But I'm a huge proponent of student voice and student choice. Where your comment gets a bit complicated would be if there was a student voice that was part of that 9-member, and they would be advisory, of course. But if there's a student voice, I am absolutely certain that teachers would raise their hand and say, what about us? And with your governance configuration, that wouldn't be one teacher, it'd be 3. And administrators would raise their hand and say, what about us? And then you'd have parents, and then you'd have central law office, and before you know it, that steering committee of 9 would be a steering committee with advisory of about 15. And that just becomes really problematic when it comes to scheduling and confidentiality. What I think is a great thing to do is once you name that new superintendent, I will highly encourage the 3 school boards to make sure that that person has immediate access to students, in all students, and not just your best and your brightest, but all your students. So I appreciate the comment. I just wanted to share that from a logistical perspective, it could get complicated. Lila?
Hi, yes. So I actually am 24 years old. I lived in Easton pretty much all my life. I am an African-American young woman here, and I was part of this district for a very long time. I went to Samuel Staples, Helen Keller. I also went to Joe Barlow. So I guess my concern would be, you know, who will create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment, school community, who will prioritize anti-racist professional development for our school leaders and staff. These are things that, you know, me as a minority in Easton, you know, I think about. I had a wonderful, wonderful experience at my school. And you know, I love Joe Barlow. I love the ER9 district, but you know, that's what students like me are thinking about. Who will prioritize anti-racist professional development for our school leaders and our staff, including maybe cultural competency and, you know, kind of just implicit bias training, coaching, restorative justice practices. It's going to be hard work, but I certainly think that it is possible and it can be done. And I don't know if you guys heard about the petition, but, you know, we wonder who will prioritize and I had nothing to do with the petition, but I read it and it was very lengthy, but, you know, who will prioritize you know, curricular review and kind of just implement implement a great response, implement a culturally responsive curricula that kind of like, you know, kind of does all this stuff. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. And I think that's important when picking a superintendent. And yeah.
So, Lila, I don't want you to believe that you shared your voice and it wasn't heard and it's not going forward. I think what's important, particularly with I think you mentioned you're 24, so you're probably 5 or 6 or 7 years out of high school,
Yes.
and you're back and you're still in the Eastern Reading community. One of the things that I think would be very helpful, as I mentioned earlier, I believe in the student voice, and I believe that your successful superintendent has to believe in the student voice in
Right.
ER9. If you're comfortable sending me either your email address or your telephone number, I assure you I'll play that forward to your new superintendent who perhaps can connect directly to you. I think that makes
Great.
a lot of sense to me. Okay, so thank you for being on.
Of course.
Is there anyone else who would like to share before we close from the steering committee? Okay, folks, thank you so much. And once again, in executive summary form, closing tomorrow, reviewing on Tuesday, interviewing the next 2 or 3 weeks, and if all goes well, public meeting to name your next school leader at some point in August. Again, I thank everybody. I thank the steering committee who's doing extraordinary work and the community members who took the time this evening to be a part of the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.